you can see that. It would be great if I can just get a couple of people to thumbs up, just so I know that everyone can indeed see the presentation whilst that gets going. Is that working okay? Fantastic. Sounds like it is. A couple little bits of housekeeping quickly. If I could ask that whilst people are talking or asking questions, if we could mute microphones just so that we can hear everyone really clearly. Obviously, if you do have any internet issues or things do start to lag, then we always advise that you just pop out of the meeting, then come back in. That seems to often do the job. As Elaine said, my name is Scott Bellamy. I'm the Deputy Director for External Engagement, so work across our marketing, student recruitment, admissions and outreach teams here at Central. I am joined, as Elaine said, by Elaine herself and Ikram, and we are delighted to be joined by Anastasia and Francesco. We will be properly introducing them a little bit further along in the presentation, where we will hear from them about their experiences of the audition process. We've got until about 7 p.m. tonight, so there's lots for us to cram in. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk as much as we possibly can about subjects which we can relate to as many drama schools as possible, but we'll of course also be talking about Central. So as we would expect, you'll be looking at a number of different schools as you do your research, as you prepare to make an application. So we're going to try and make sure that the information we provide tonight is as useful and as applicable as it possibly can be. So specifically, I'm going to talk a little bit about choosing your schools. I think that's a really important part of the decision-making process and the research process, and not something to be taken lightly. I'm sure a lot of you will be deep in that process at the moment. So I'm going to provide hopefully some useful tips and tricks for that. We're then going to talk a little bit about the audition process and preparing for that audition, and we'll hear from our student and alumni representative, and then we'll talk a little bit about top tips, and then we'll go into questions. As we go through, if you think of a question, please feel free to use the chat function, or we do also have the Q&A function enabled as well. So you're more than welcome to use either of them, or when we get to the end, as long as time is allowing, feel free to raise your hand and you can add in a question or speak a question to the group as well, and we'll answer as many as we possibly can do during the session. So I'm going to start just talking about choosing your schools, and this is a really, really important part of the process and something that I think can be quite daunting at times. And one of the first things that a lot of students need to consider is whether a conservatoire, drama school, small specialist, however we want to call it, is the right environment and course style versus a larger university degree. I used to work for some big universities in the UK with fantastic drama courses, but it was only when I joined Central around 10 years ago that I realised just how different a BA drama course at a large university is compared to a BA acting course at a small specialist institution. Everything from the industry exposure, contact hours, and the focused style of training makes small specialist study quite a different kind of product rather than university drama degrees, where it's a little bit broader. Again, no one is better than the other. It is all about finding the course that is right for you, for where you're at, and for what your career aspirations are. One of the most challenging, I think, and confusing bits is the application system, the fees, and the financial support. So as some of you may have already been doing research, you may have seen that there are, depending on the school, up to 3 different ways of making an application. The first is through the UCAS main scheme, which is the scheme by which most people will be making an application to undergraduate study in the UK. So that's the UCAS main scheme, where you have up to 5 university course choices, and that is indeed the scheme that Central is on. There is also another system called UCAS Conservatoires, which is an additional scheme to the UCAS main scheme, where you make a payment to UCAS in order to make extra choices, and some small specialist conservatoires are on that. And then for a smaller number of schools, it is direct entry, so you apply direct to the school. So there are a couple, including RADA, for whom they operate on direct entry. And it's always a really useful tool, as I'll talk about in a little bit, just to map out from the schools that you are researching some of those kind of key bits of information, like how do I apply, what are the fees, and of course, what are the financial support? Because many universities and some small specialists like Central, you can access a student loan if you're a UK-based student to support your fees, whereas for some other schools, it's slightly different. Open days, campus tours, virtual tours, and of course, sessions like the one we're in today are really, really useful tools. We hope these are really useful in terms of giving a good amount of information about the courses, but really importantly about that audition process, which is the bit that small specialist institutions especially use as the main way of assessing suitability for the course. And of course, it is also a way for you to assess which school feels most right for you. But open days, campus tours, and virtual tours, of which many universities have available on their websites, are also a really useful tool to get to know the spaces, the atmosphere, and of course, the environment that you're looking to study in. So I always kind of suggest that just making a little bit of a spreadsheet, a simple spreadsheet, a bit like the one that you see on the screen now, can be a really useful tool. Sometimes really useful in just laying things out, making it really clear kind of what the kind of parameters are. But sometimes that can be really useful in terms of looking at how you might be looking at covering the tuition fee element or the audition fee, or even just how different the processes are, which is of course what we're going to be talking about in the main in this session. So I'm going to talk about audition requirements now. I'm going to talk broadly at first, and then I'm going to talk about Central's audition requirements. So if you're applying for acting courses specifically, you will typically be asked to prepare 2 contrasting speeches. This can differ sometimes, and you will see a few schools that will only ask you to do 1 speech, but typically it will be 2 contrasting speeches, which are normally 1 contemporary and 1 classical speech. If you're applying for musical theatre courses, you'll often find it's a speech and it's also a song. Potentially some triple threat musical theatre courses will ask also for a dance routine as well. But in the main, these are the types of things that schools in the main will be asking you for. What's really important is that self-tape has become, in the main, used by the majority of specialist institutions for the first round of an audition process. Many institutions have at least 2 rounds of an audition process. At Central, we have 3, which I'm going to run through in a little bit. But for most schools, self-tape is used. But it is worth saying that there are a small number of schools that are still doing an in-person first round. So Royal Conservatoire of Scotland are one that comes to mind, that are still doing a first round in person. So again, it's something that's really useful to do and note on that spreadsheet that I mentioned on the slide before. Some institutions do insist on a monologue from a pre-chosen list. And so this is again where really noting the specific requirements for each institution is really, really important. At Central, in the many years I've been at Central, I have seen our requirements require a monologue from a pre-chosen list, and then giving everyone the choice and then going back to a list. At the moment, you are able to choose a monologue of your choosing as long as it meets the requirements that we set out in the audition outline. If you really don't know where to start, then you will see on our audition web pages a link to a classical monologue list if you really don't know where to start, just as a guide, but it is totally up to you as long as it is within the parameters that we set. So a really key tip is to carefully look at the exact requirements and note these down, because sometimes when I'm talking to prospective applicants for a wide variety of schools, someone might say, this is my classical speech, or this is my contemporary speech for my drama school auditions. And it's always just worth making sure that that speech that you've been preparing definitely meets the requirements each of the schools that you're applying for, because again, it's one of those things that shows us that attention to detail if you've ensured that what you're going to be performing for us does indeed meet our requirements. So I'm now going to talk specifically about Central's requirements. And at Central, we have, I would say, a slightly unique first round approach. We actually ask for 4 different items as part of your self-tape for the first round. And the reason we do that is because in your first round audition, we actually consider you for all 3 of our BA acting courses. So we have BA acting classical and contemporary, BA acting contemporary and devised, and we have BA acting musical theatre. So you may have kind of heard those names of the courses and kind of linked which parts of the 4 items above link with which, but I'll go through each of them individually to ensure that it's clear what we expect from those. So we use the self-tape first round and do note down those requirements. So we ask for 1 classical speech, Elizabethan or Jacobean, so usually that becomes a Shakespeare speech. We ask for 1 contemporary speech, which is typically post-1960 and not from a film script. We ask for 1 unaccompanied song, which, as you can imagine, provides us with an example of your ability to tell a story through song, and so informs a selection for our musical theatre programme. And we also ask for 1 devised performance, typically 30 to 90 seconds, and that's inspired by a stimulus. Now, the stimulus that we are talking about, you will be able to see on our audition pages, those stimuli that you are able to choose from. We have 4 options, and we ask you to choose one that you feel the most connection with, and then create a devised performance based on that. And that performance can take pretty much any form, as long as it is the type of performance that you can perform in front of the camera as part of your self-tape. It's worth saying that with the song, we do get a lot of applicants who are not particularly confident singers and are therefore not interested in the musical theatre program. So if you really are not keen to undertake a song, then you are able to do a poem instead. So you're able to choose a poem and use that as a means to tell your story. I always recommend to students, to applicants, that even if you're not interested in musical theatre, I always recommend that people do the song. And the reason for that is twofold. As I said earlier, it allows you an opportunity to tell a story through the character who is performing that song, but also it shows that you're willing to take risks and be open and be outside your comfort zone, which I think is a feature of actor training that all trainees do come across. So it's something that we do like to see. As I say, if you choose not to do the song, then we will not be considering you for musical theatre. So that is how the first round happens. So we receive your self-tape. It is seen by at least 2 panelists, and those panelists are professionals working within the industry as professional actors, and people working in musical theatre as well. So your tape will be seen by at least 2 of those, and they will be making an assessment of both your core acting ability, which forms the foundation of our assessment, and then they'll be looking at kind of more nuanced skills and potential that align with the 3 acting courses. And it's worth saying that if we do recall someone from the first round to the second round, which I'm about to talk about, then we can recall you for 1 course, we could recall you for 2 courses, or we can even recall you for all 3 courses. So in the same way that we consider you for all 3 courses, which for an applicant gives you almost three applications in one, the ability and the flexibility to recall applicants for multiple courses also gives us the ability to watch the whole of your tape and really get a solid and well-rounded view of your skill set and your potential to benefit from the training we offer. So we find that works really, really well in ensuring that we feel confident that we've assessed a really broad range of your skills and the different things that you're showcasing to us at the first round audition. If you do get recalled to the second round, the requirements for the second round can differ depending on which course or courses you are recalled for. It's also worth saying that with the second round, we will give you the option to undertake that second round online or in person. And it's really, really important to stress that you do not have a better chance to get to final recall, which is the round after the second round. There's no advantage or disadvantage to doing your second round online or in person. So everyone will have an equal chance regardless of which route you decide to take. So for the second round, there are a number of things that we may ask you to do for the second round, but what we won't ask you to do is to learn new material necessarily. So we may ask you to repeat your first round audition pieces. In the second rounds, it's worth saying, we do them in a bit more depth because they are smaller groups that we work with in the second round. So we may ask you to repeat those first round audition pieces. We may workshop your pieces with you. We may ask you to undertake improvisations. You may participate in a physical and/or vocal workshop. You may sing accompanied and/or unaccompanied. That's for BA Acting Musical Theatre only. And you may participate in a vocal assessment, or you might participate in a brief interview. So there are lots of different things that can happen in the second round, which might be course dependent and might be based on the notes that we've made on the basis of your first round tape. If you are successful at second round, we will then invite you to a final recall. And what's really important to say about the final recall is final recalls for UK-based students will take place at Central's campus in London. If you are an international student and getting to the UK is difficult, then we do undertake some final recalls online for international students. So don't worry if you are applying from overseas, we will be able to do a final recall just fine either way. So that's not something to worry about. The final recall, much like the second round audition, we can final recall you for one course. We could final recall you for two courses. And in some cases, we do get final recalls for all three of the courses. So again, all possibilities are there. It keeps it really open and allows us to assess each candidate individually. At the final recall, you will participate in further intensive workshop sessions, which may involve voice, movement and acting, and further focus on your original choice of speeches and pieces. And it's really important to say that the final recall itself will be with the program leader of the course. So the first round self-tape, as I mentioned, will be seen by at least two of our panelists. The second round, so that's the initial recall, that will be undertaken again by our team of panelists. And then the final recall is undertaken by our program leaders. So again, you will likely be working with the pieces that you brought in the first round. They will have seen all of the feedback from your first and second rounds as well. And the final recall is really designed to allow you to get a real sense of what a day or the type of work we do on the course is like, which is really useful for you as an applicant because it gives you that opportunity to get a sense of the learning environment and whether that feels like the right place for you and your development as an actor. And that's really, really crucial. So it's very easy for me to say, but whilst we are assessing you through the process, it's absolutely crucial that you're also assessing us and whether we're the right fit for you. You may also be asked to present a self-devised theatre piece, a new song or dance, do some sight reading work on a scene, and you will attend an interview session at the final recall. So again, you'll see that flexibility of the different things that do align with certain courses, depending on what you're recalled for. So again, we try and make that a little bit like a half day of actually being on the course and then followed by that interview. And you'll get the opportunity there to meet some current students as well, again, to get a sense of what being on the course is like and what their journey has been like as well. I'm sure we're going to have lots and lots of questions about the process as we go through. I just thought I'd address a couple of frequent questions that we get, because I think this can be a really good myth buster for some people. And often there's a question that might not be a question people want to ask, but it's the question that a lot of people are thinking. So for the self-tape, should I look directly at the panel or camera? We ask you in terms of the self-tape to not look directly at the camera. And I put panel there in case you're obviously applying for other schools. Typically, schools will ask you to not look directly at the panel. We always say, certainly for the self-tape, if you just find a place just above or just above and to the side of the camera, then that's always a good place to focus on. It allows the panel who are watching your video to be able to see everything they need to see of your performance. The next question we get a lot is, what should I wear? Which seems such a simple question, but is really, really important, actually. So there's two answers to this. So firstly, what you should wear should be anything that is comfortable and that you feel comfortable in order to perform. We want you to be as relaxed as you possibly can because we want to see an authentic performance from you. And so we want you to be comfortable in that space. One note we would say is when doing a self-tape, we do recommend that you try not to wear, for instance, a top which has writing on it. So anything that can distract a panelist's focus. We wouldn't want to be not focusing on your performance and trying to read what it says on your t-shirt, for instance. So as plain kind of clothes as possible, but really important is something that is comfortable for you to wear so you can perform at your best. How do I find out if I make it to the next round or get an offer? So if you are recalled for the second round or for a final recall, then we will get in touch with you via email. And there's some really important parts to this because if you are making your UCAS application and you are using your school email address on your application, then we would recommend that you try to add at cssd.ac.uk to your safe senders list. Or if you can, to not use your school email address on your UCAS application, just because school firewalls can sometimes block emails from universities, or what can happen is emails from universities can sometimes go into junk or spam folders. So we recommend always that you should check your junk or spam folders. In terms of getting an offer, the first communication that we or any school that's on the UCAS main scheme will make will be through UCAS. So you'll get a notification through UCAS as to what the outcome of your application is if you have been made an offer or if you've been unsuccessful. If we do make you an offer and you get that through UCAS, we will then follow that up with a formal offer email as well, which includes a raft of information, which we really encourage you to read very, very carefully. And that will also include information about how and when to apply for a bursary or a scholarship. And that's really, really important. One question we get quite a lot is, how many schools should I apply for? And that's a really personal question for yourself to think about. I sometimes recommend no more than about 6, but that's really so that you can give the care and attention to the audition preparation that you want to do for the schools that you're applying for. Obviously, there is the temptation, there is the ability to apply for upwards of 10 schools, but I think there is a really important thing here about both being kind to yourself and not giving yourself so much work that you feel you're not able to do justice to the individual auditions. But that is a very personal question. Some students may only apply for 1, and that's absolutely fine. If you're applying for English or psychology degrees and a BA acting is your 5th of your one choice of your 5 on UCAS, that's absolutely fine. We audition at Central every single person that applies, as long as you apply by the UCAS equal consideration deadline, which is the 14th of January at 6 p.m. and that's UK time. As long as you apply by that date and that time, then we will always invite you to audition with us. And that's really, really important. What if I'm unsuccessful? And this is a question we get a lot. And we're very lucky at Central. We do get a large number of applications, as do a number of the other well-known drama schools within the UK. And if you're unsuccessful, first thing is don't worry. It's very easy, I know, for me to say that. But actually, what I think you will find is that regardless of the outcome of your audition or auditions, the audition experience for many is an extremely useful and valuable development process for individuals. You'll learn so much from the audition process, regardless of the outcome. We do have a lot of students who have applied multiple years in a row, and that's absolutely fine. One thing that is important is that at Central, if you are unsuccessful, regardless of whether you are unsuccessful at the first round, the initial recall, or even at final recall, we are able to offer you feedback. That feedback is upon request, and we do detail how to ask for that feedback in the invite to audition link. So that's really, really important. But that feedback is really important because we want you to follow that passion, and we want you to develop as a performer. And that is at the heart of our audition process. So that's really, really important to mention. What is Central looking for? I'm not going to go through all of these individually, and I think a lot of them will probably feel quite, in some ways, quite obvious. But ultimately, what we are looking for is the potential to benefit from the training that we offer on our courses. That is what all of our assessments is really leading up to. We're not looking for the best, someone who is absolutely perfect, because if you're perfect, I'm not quite sure what our training can help you with. But also the disciplines of acting and musical theatre, they are a craft, and we are always constantly developing as individuals. And so our job is to obviously assess your work, your performance, your engagement. And really the challenge for us is to find the students, the students who we feel are going to benefit the most from acting, the actor training that we offer. Obviously, it goes into a little bit more detail into in these areas, but it's also worth saying that what Central is looking for is not going to be dissimilar to what a lot of the other schools are looking for. Ultimately, especially at first round, we are looking for authenticity. We are looking for you to show us who you are through the characters, through the pieces that you are showing to us, that you are performing. We get a lot of people who worry about the devised piece. But really importantly about the devised piece, it's a blank canvas for you to show us part of your creativity that we're not going to see through monologues or through the song. There is no wrong answer to the devised piece, as long as it is real and authentic to you. That's what we're looking for. So it's worth just saying that before we move on to the next section and hear from our current students, which is our next section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing briefly, and I'm going to invite Anastasia and Francesco to talk to us about their journey to Central, their audition experience, and maybe a little bit about how they prepared and what questions and challenges they faced. So Anastasia and Francesco, do we have you with us on the call still?
Yes. Hi, my name is Anastasia, and I recently graduated from the BA Acting Musical Theatre program at Central. Francesco, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, yes. Hello, I'm Francesco. I'm a current third year on the now CD course, CD course. So contemporary and devised. It's just changed titles. Yeah. Anastasia, do you want to start us off with that? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, my name is Anastasia, and I'm from Orlando, Florida. So, a lot of you international applicants, I am happy to also answer any questions about what that might look like. So, I applied for drama schools in a way 3 different times, but my journey to Central was kind of long in that way. I didn't actually apply to Central the first time I applied to drama schools, or even the second time. I applied to some other drama schools, and I went to University of California, Irvine, for a year. And then I decided I wanted that conservatory style training as opposed to the university like kind of environment. Because we kind of talked a bit about how those are really, really different. So when everybody kind of went into quarantine for COVID, I started thinking about my options and applied again. And I ended up at a foundation course at Institute of the Arts Barcelona, if anybody's heard of it, for musical theater. And one of my tutors there, she had gone to Central, so she recommended it as a school to put on my list. And I did indeed have a sort of document, a sort of spreadsheet to keep track of all the schools that I auditioned for because it can be very stressful. And I do really feel for applicants going through this process because a lot of people don't understand it and understand how involved it is. Um, so when I applied this third time, I applied to Central, and it was really, really it was a really, really positive actually process for me because I felt like when I got to come in person for the third round, I just really enjoyed the audition process and kind of how I got to meet current students and talk to them about their experiences. But I think that I think that for the auditions, the biggest things that I'd say is that it's really important to try to stay open and open-minded, because I think it can be really easy to close yourself off. In fact, like I did the same thing was one of the reasons I didn't apply to Central initially in the first two times was because I thought it was like too acting heavy for me as a course for musical theater. And I was actually incredibly wrong in that assumption because it actually ended up being the perfect course for me. And I realized that I was much more acting led as a performer than I thought. So I definitely encourage you to keep your mind open to not just different courses, but different schools and different paths that you can take because I think that everybody's journey is quite unique and really special. Yeah, so that's a bit about me. And Francesca, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. Right, I'll try and not repeat similar things to Anastasia. I'm also technically an international student. I grew up in Italy, and so I also feel for the whole process because I had no support really to how UCAS worked and all the intricacies of what drama school was, the university versus federation, approach. The thing that I knew from the start was I wanted to train as an actor and I wanted to get as much time hands-on training as possible. And so I immediately sort of like understood that university wasn't the right approach for me. And so I decided I'd do drama school no matter what. That was what I wanted to get into. And it took me 3 attempts. The first time I got onto a foundation for a drama school in the UK. So I moved over to the UK for the first time and I did that foundation, which was fantastic in setting, the foundation of what I was looking for and getting a sense of like, oh, this is what I want to do. And then I didn't get in the next year, although I did get recalled for the CD course at Central, and I kind of got a taste for what the course could be like. At the time, it was over Zoom, so it was a bit different. But then the final year I applied, I was lucky enough to get recalled for both the acting, classical and contemporary, I think it's called now, and CD course. And it was the first time I've heard other people echo this in on my course or other courses where auditioning, I felt like I learned something and I felt like I got pushed and I discovered a whole new aspect of acting. And I actually enjoyed my audition, which sounds crazy because every year I audition, I was like, oh my God, I have to go in and do my contemporary and my classical and get redirected and blah, 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 blah. But with the CD course specifically, but Central in general, I just had a great time. And I felt like I learned a load, which for me was a clear sign of this is the place for me. And saying that could be Central for you, or it could be, any other place that you might apply to. Each person's journey with this is so individual. And that's something I think needs to be highlighted in the sense that one school will be perfect for one person and another one will be for another person. So just trust your gut. And as much as you're getting, it's the cringe thing that people used to say when I was auditioning, I never believed it, but it's very much a case of like you're auditioning them as much as they're auditioning you, in the sense that like if you go I had a final round in another drama school that same year, and I went and I just did not like it. I was not vibing with it, and it was a great drama school, but I auditioned them in that sense, and I was like, this is just not for me. And you need to kind of trust your gut on that, because you have to think that you're going to spend 3 years with these people in this building, a lot of hours and very stressful hours. So you want to be in a place you care, you want to be at. So trust your gut on that. And with finding stuff, it's tough. I'm currently looking for stuff for Showcase, which is a whole other thing to navigate. But I know how tough it is to find, like, especially contemporary monologues. What I can recommend is try and find a writer maybe that you really like the style of. Look at all his work. Maybe there's a monologue that doesn't work for you, but you like the style. Look at all the other stuff they've written. And if you can get down to London, which I know is not easy or accessible for a lot of people, the National's bookshop has loads of places. You can just sit there for hours flicking through. I did that the other day, actually, for Showcase. And they have lists as well, monologues, I think, if you ask at the front desk. But yeah, I hope I didn't waffle on too long, but that's a bit of a smattering about me.
That's fantastic. Thank you both. And I'm sure I can see some questions coming on in the chat. And obviously, if we get questions, we'll invite you to answer some of those as well. But that's a really, really useful insight into your experiences. We did just have a question which I was just answering around the video, the self-tape itself. And I think something I would say, and please do add in Anastasia and Francesco. Obviously, the difference between doing a self-tape and coming in for an in-person first round audition is quite different. With the self-tape, obviously you have an element of creative control on that, whereas an audition in person is in the moment, on the day, and can feel quite different. And I think what's really important to say with this is that creative control can lead and does lead to lots of people feeling like they need to produce this perfect audition tape, which can lead to people doing 20, 30, 40 takes searching for this perfect product. And there is no such thing. And we recommend, as I've said in one of the answers to the question, that as long as you really do your preparation up front, and Francesco has offered some really great pointers there, so that's really, really useful. We would recommend doing 3 versions of your tape, perform all your pieces one after the other, and then really just see which one feels the most natural and real. Because if you do get into that sense of trying to do 10, 20, 30 takes, you're going to miss the stuff that's actually really good and really authentic. So it's a really easy thing to kind of trap to fall into is striving for perfection. But as I've said there, we don't care about production value. We're not judging you on production value at all. It can be done on a phone, it can be done whatever, as long as we can hear and see you clearly. That is what we are assessing. I don't know, Anastasia or Francesco, if you'd want to add to that in terms of the prep for the tape itself.
Yeah, sure. Anastasia, do you want to start us off again?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think exactly what Scott is saying. Like, I've heard some people even like kind of try to set a limit for themselves, and like it's something I have to remind myself as well, because it's really easy to get into this like I have to get it perfect. I have to get it to perfect. If I do it one more time, it'll just be slightly better. And usually it doesn't happen. You just get more and more tired. So I often say like between like 3 and 5 for sure would be like the limit, like the maximum. And then if you really, really hate all those takes for whatever reason, say you're sick that day, say you're just having a really bad day, come back to it and however long you have. Like I know sometimes we wait till the last second. So even if it's I wait an hour, I'm gonna go have dinner and come back to it. But ideally even I'm gonna come back to it tomorrow, because sometimes you'll rewatch those tapes and go, actually that wasn't that awful. I think I was just being really dramatic and hard on myself. And other times you'll rewatch it and go, yeah, I actually would really like to retape that, and I think I can do a little bit better. But I think to give yourself that space that honestly you would give a friend if you were watching their self-tape, as opposed to just being extremely self-critical, is something that's really, really important. And yeah, I think everybody has a general sense of self-preparedness. And so once you know that you're prepared, I think you kind of just have to, at that point, trust that you can do it and you will do it and you will produce the best work you can. And that's really all you can ask for. So yeah, Francesca, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no, I 100%. Yeah, we've had plenty of industry come in and talk to us about self-taping, and it's always the same thing. Stop at 3, maybe 5. But I found as well, in the past I used to do that, tape 10, 20 times, 30, like every night kind of thing, trying to chase this perfect tape, and it just does not exist. Um, but also to kind of demystify because when I was auditioning, people would say, "Oh yeah, trust that you've done the work and you're prepared and you can do it in 3." And I was always a bit confused to what exactly is it to be prepared? Like, how do I know I'm ready? And I guess that's obviously very individual, but if little things like know who you're talking to, know where you're coming from. If you look at Uta Hagen's 9 questions, that's a good one for me, to come back to when I'm in a tough spot. I have very little time to prep something. But those simple questions of who am I? Who am I talking to? What's my relationship to that person? It's just basic groundwork that will hopefully give you a bit more clarity on what you're doing and will hopefully help with your preparation, whatever that might be. But just to demystify that a bit, because I always found it quite tricky to know what that meant.
That's a really important point, and I think that's even more true if you are using a monologue book. Read the whole play. You can use the monologue book to like help you choose, but read the whole play, really know that inside out, and those pointers are really, really useful, Francesco. So thank you for that. And really choose those monologues that you do connect with. It is so, so important. We sometimes get the question, oh, you must hear the same Shakespeare monologue again and again and again. And yes, we do hear a lot of the same Shakespeare monologues, but students who have done that preparedness and are bringing their authentic self to the pieces means that every Shakespeare monologue we hear, even if it's the same monologue from the same play, is going to be different. And so think about your individual creative voice to tell that story, and that's really what we're looking for in the first round. And I think it's also worth saying that we don't mind what your experience is. We often get a lot. One of the first questions I got asked when I first joined Central was, oh, if I'm 18, I don't get into drama school. And that's just not true at Central. We can't speak for other drama schools, obviously. But we're not looking at your age in any way, shape, or form when we are making assessments. We are really looking at, can you show us who you are as a person based on your life experiences through the pieces you're doing? And, that doesn't matter what age you are. In the 10 years I've been at Central, I think I've seen 2 17-year-olds start on the course. So again, age is just not a factor here. And whether you've been having drama lessons since you were 3 years old, or whether you picked up drama as a passion at 16, again, on paper, that doesn't matter. There are pros and cons to each. So again, really don't let your experience or your perceived lack of experience feel like it's a disadvantage, because these things are not necessarily disadvantages, and sometimes can be strengths as well. I think we've got about 8 minutes for other questions. So we'll just head into the chat quickly. I know we've tried to choose a few questions. I know there was one question around the MA auditions. There will be an MA online information session in the new year, so do keep an eye on our events for that. That'll be a really useful one, which will talk about MA audition process. And unlike the BA program that we're talking about today, which has an application deadline of the 14th of January, our MA acting deadline is not until the 17th of April. So you'll have plenty of time in that. I can see Poppy, you have your hand up, so please feel free to unmute and ask a question of myself, Anastasia, or Francesco.
Hiya. I was just wondering, what's the sort of split between acting, singing, and dancing for the musical theatre course pathway?
Hi. So, that's a great question. I'd say that at the heart of all 3 of the acting courses, it's very much an acting course. So, the acting musical theater course, I'd say that acting definitely takes up the largest percentage of the kind of training that you're going to do. But that being said, like, it sounds a bit maybe strange to say, but it is very much a musical theater course, and that you will still be taking weekly singing lessons. You will have ensemble singing and dance as well. And then you take ballet, jazz in first year, as well as ballroom. And then you also do a choreography piece at the end of your first year. And then in second year, you do ballet, jazz, and tap as well as having a dance intensive at the beginning of every second term. So that's a bit kind of about it. So I definitely say that the biggest one is probably acting, followed by singing, and then dance. Is not the most dance heavy course compared to some other musical theater courses at UK schools, but you still get dance classes, which is really, really awesome, as well as movement classes from a more acting perspective. And that's quite nice because a lot of musical theater courses, you don't get that. I hope that answers the question okay.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you, Poppy, and thank you, Anastasia. I'm going to try and go between in person on the mic and also on the chat as well, because we've got lots of applications. We've got one question here. After you apply, how long do you get to put the self-tape together? So one of the things we changed this last year actually, and we've continued that for this year, is you can actually look on the website as to when your self-tape will be due right now, because your self-tape deadline is dictated by when we receive your application. Obviously, when you send it, you might, if you're at a school or college, you might be sending that application, which will then go to your teacher or your references, who will do their reference, and they will press submit. So it's based on when we receive your application. But if we were, for instance, to receive your application between the 6th of November and the 18th of December, which is next week, then your self-tape deadline would be the 7th of January, or would be at least before the 7th of January. But for many of you in this chat, if you applied to us, or if we received your application between the 19th of December and that 14th of January equal consideration deadline, then you will have until the 4th of February to submit your self-tape. So I think I'm losing my voice now, which is always very, very useful in these sessions. We had another question about for the devised piece, whether you can write justifications. No, we don't allow you to do that. We're really interested in your creative choices, and we will watch your self-tape in its entirety. So we will watch the devised piece, and that will we'll use that. We don't ask you to justify or talk about why you've chosen certain things. With that, I'll hand over to Greta, who you've had your hand up, so please feel free to unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Cool. I've got two questions. One is, I'm not based in London, but I could make a trip there. So how close generally are the second recall and the third recall, like in dates? And the second one is, wait, where do I have it? Oh, what is the panel's like opinion on stitched together monologues? So like ones that aren't originally a monologue in the play, but are like broken by like single word replies from another character that can, like, it can be cut to be a monologue that makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to invite Francesca and Anastasia to talk maybe a little bit about the second part of that, but just in terms of the closeness of the dates, realistically, there'll probably be at the very least a week between the second round and third round, but it's often longer because the final recalls take place on site and the second rounds can take place on site or online. We try and move through them as quickly as we can, but obviously, as you can imagine, that deadline that I just spoke about around the February self-tape date, because a lot of people, probably the majority of applicants, apply between the 19th of December and the 14th of January, we're talking around easily over 1,500 tapes just in that period alone. So we can't guarantee that you'll have your second recall really quickly. We have to, as a school, we have to have made all of our offers by the middle of May. So we aim to have all of our offers out because we're talking about lots of students here. We try to ensure that our final recalls are done by the end of April. That can sometimes go just slightly into May, but we try to do that by the end of April. So your second rounds and your final recall could be any time realistically from the end of February all the way through to nearly to the end of April. So we can't guarantee that. One thing that I didn't mention is I mentioned a bit earlier that we don't charge for our auditions. We removed the audition fee a few years ago. And what we also did is we introduced travel grants for UK-based students who meet the widening participation criteria for the final recalls. And that can be up to, I think it's up to £125 to cover your travel for that. You can have a look on our website. There's a link to the travel grants page. So we really recommend you have a look at that. And that can be a really helpful tool. But as I said, that second round, you have the choice of online or in person there as well. For your second question, just around broken monologues, I don't know, Anastasia or Francesco, if you have a view on that.
I obviously am not on the panel, so I can't claim to know exactly. However, doing again showcase right now, the way we're talking about it is it shouldn't be a problem, really. I don't see why, as long as it makes sense and there's a logical, it doesn't feel like, when you're doing it that there's those cuts. I don't see why specifically it would be a problem. However, again, I am not on the panel, so I can't claim to be, certain on that. But I really can't see why that would be an issue, especially if it's like a one-word kind of like interruption, because it's one continuation of thought, hopefully, through the monologue. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that answers it quite well, actually. So I think it partly depends on how broken it is. If it's one word, then it should be absolutely fine. Got a question here. Apologies if it's been. Oh no, we've got an answer to that one already. Just thinking of any really last questions, because they're going to kick me out of the building here. Not long after 7 o'clock. Hayden, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, hello. You said that the tape should be in one video. Is it okay to cut the different sections together, or should it all be in one continual take?
So some people do this. What we try and say, you definitely don't need to do that. We find that for a lot of performers, the process feels more natural and feels better just doing it all as one, and that is what we would recommend. We want to see you be able to perform the pieces back to back, and you will see we actually have a really useful shot. It's called like shot options for your self-tape, or something like that, which is available. You can click through that from our audition pages on the website. It gives you almost a blow by blow as to how to put the tape together. We do prefer you do it as a single tape, because that is much more natural. And it goes back to this point around production value. We're really not judging you on production value, and just seeing it continuously almost a bit shows us your preparedness for the work as well, because obviously you could shoot one day, one the next day, and things like that, and it just feels more natural if it is done as a continuous video. We are over time, however. I'm going to try and find at least one more question that we haven't answered. If there's one thing you recommend doing between now and saying your first audition, what would it be? I don't know if that one's been answered. Oh, Anastasia
I
has
tried to
answered
answer
that.
as many as possible in the group chat. Sorry. And also, we also have UniBuddy right now. I didn't know if you wanted to mention that, Scott, that if you didn't get your question answered, you can literally message me after on UniBuddy on our website. So
that's a really, really good point. So Anastasia might be here for this session, but she's also available as a live almost avatar on our website, and you can have a conversation with Anastasia and ask some of these questions to Anastasia. And yeah, go from there. But also you can also email us as well following the session if there are burning questions that you want answered. It's also worth saying, if you have made your application and you have questions regarding your application or your upcoming self-tape or recall audition, then on UniBuddy we also have our admissions team as well, so they can be really, really useful for that as well, and we find that that's working really, really well. Paulina, I have already handed over your feedback thing to our admissions team even whilst we've been on this call, so we'll be in touch around that. And I think we've got through most of the questions. I hope we have. There's always questions that people are going to have after the session, and there'll be questions that we haven't been able to cover off. It's very difficult to do this in an hour, I must admit, but hopefully the stuff we've covered has been useful. I think, you know, the fact that we're all here today says that we're trying to prepare in the best possible way, and we're trying to find as much information and guidance as we can for what can really feel like an overwhelming process for many people on this call. And I would say we never ever underestimate how much work, how much passion, how much commitment goes into not just applying and researching for the schools, but then going through this audition process. And from our point of view, you know, we're just really keen through that audition to understand who you are, the skills and the potential that you have as an individual. It's the biggest challenge that we face is trying to see so many fantastic, committed, passionate and diverse voices through the audition process, and kind of as best as we possibly can select the people for to make offers to that we feel are going to make a brilliant cohort. And it's a good place to finish on around cohort, because don't forget, when obviously the self-tape is us seeing you, but when we get to recall and final recall, never underestimate how much we're looking for how you can work with others. That is so critical. We would rather have 20 people in a class that can work really well together than 20 people who might have lots of skills but can't work very well together. Because with this actor training, with this type of environment, the people who you're training with, in many ways, the experiences, the backgrounds, the perspectives that they're bringing is going to make your training better. And that's so important to us here at Central. So I feel that's a really nice place to end on. As Francesco and Anastasia said, this process is really important. It's so much for you to be choosing the right school for you. And, you know, Central may not be the right school for you, and that's absolutely fine. It's more important that you find the place that is right for you and feels right for you. As I say, we're here on UniBuddy. We're here via email for any questions that you have. Hopefully that's been a really useful session. If you're joining us late at night or really early morning, I hope you have a nice sleep or nice rest of the day. And if it's the afternoon where you are, then I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and evening. Thank you to Anastasia. Thank you to Francesco. Thank you to Ikram, and thank you to Elaine. It's been an absolute pleasure to see so many wonderful and happy and passionate faces in the room today. Thank you, and wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for coming, everyone. Bye-bye.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.